I'm going to call the Springfield City Council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Councilors Weber.
Here.
Moe.
Here.
Bradley. Here. Doyle.
Here.
And Missionary.
And Councilor Piscieri is excused. He's going to try to join us a little bit later for the interviews when he gets to a phone line. We have a lot on the agenda this evening, but the first one is the housing diversity tax exemption. Katie, come on up.
I'm gonna try to turn on the clicker. All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Katie Carroll. I'm the city's housing analyst. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the property tax exemption council's considering. It's called the staff's calling it the housing diversity tax exemption. You might be more familiar with this as the multiple unit property tax exemption or the MUPI. That's what it's called in many cities. Eugene, Cottage Grove, both use that term. As you'll see, there are several people behind me tonight. I'll especially point out the economic development manager, Ali Camp, and then finance director, Nathan Bell. I've been talking with both of them as I've been working on this, and they are available to help answer any questions tonight, though I think in future work sessions, they'll probably be more present than what we're talking about tonight. So this is a state-enabled property tax exemption that cities and counties can choose to implement. It's designed to incentivize the development of multiple unit housing near transit and in core areas. It's an application-based incentive program. So if the city moves forward with this, we'd need to adopt program standards, minimum requirements for applicants. And there are some things that the state statutes require, but there's quite a bit of flexibility with this property tax exemption for the city to dictate what types of housing we would want to see through it. Since it is a discretionary program, it can be paused at any time. And then by statute, council would have to approve every project or deny projects. So it kind of comes up tier level for every application. And there are at least 9 cities in Oregon that we were able to find that either currently have this tax exemption or are considering it. Maybe my clicker is not working. Cool. Thank you, AJ. So council's been talking about this for a while, so I've been a little bit more brief in the main memo and in the introduction to sort of the general details of this property tax exemption. But if you want more information, attachment 4 has kind of general background on the exemption, and then attachment 5 goes into details of other cities' programs. And then part of my goal tonight is to kind of reorient folks since it's been a while since we've talked about this. We do have some new counselors also that may be newer to this topic, so I'm happy to answer those kind of general questions too. But where this all came from is between 2016 and 2017, the council was working on developing its housing strategy. And one of the tools that the council identified that it wanted to look into were property tax exemptions. And this was one of a few different property tax exemptions on council's list. So then in 2017, council kind of looked at a comparison between this tax exemption and the vertical housing development program, which is something that was and still is in place in town. And both of these are property tax exemptions designed to incentivize development of multiple unit housing near transit. And at the time, council liked this property tax exemption because it offers some more flexibility for the city. It's a little bit better for developers in some ways. So they directed staff to keep working on it. And then between 2017 and 2020, council had several different meetings on this. Most of those were focused on where in Springfield the council wanted to offer this program. And then due to some staff capacity issues, it's kind of put on pause for a couple of years, but council confirmed last spring that they wanted staff to keep working on it. So we've picked it up again. So the goal for tonight is, like I said, to reorient council to this topic. We do have a couple of questions for council as well related to checking in on the areas where the exemption would be offered and then talking about some financial details. And then we'll have another session on this at the beginning of May, where we'll dive more into the program details. And that's where I think Nathan and Ali will be able to help with some more questions. And one requirement from that in particular is that under the state statute for this property tax exemption, applicants have to provide at least one public benefit as part of the project. So there's a lot of flexibility for the city to decide what that means and what that would look like. So we'll dive into that next time more. Oh, okay, now it works. So first getting into the areas where this tax exemption would be offered. So by statute, we can only offer it in areas within a quarter mile of transit or in core areas unless the city's offering it for affordable housing, in which case it could be available citywide. Staff isn't recommending using the tax exemption in this way because we do already have the low income rental housing property tax exemption, or the LRPD, for low income housing, and it works a little bit better for that type of housing because it has some better benefits for it. So this tonight, we're really talking more about like market rate housing that we're trying to incentivize. In previous work sessions, council, like I said, reviewed kind of general areas of Springfield where they might want to offer this, and then looked at some actual maps of areas that it directed staff to look into. So when we picked this up again, we looked at those maps, and then staff has proposed some changes to how basically the map boundaries are drawn. So not where the areas are, but just kind of how we're drawing boundaries. And those are reflected in the maps that are in your packet. And so the changes that staff is recommending is first to draw the maps based on plan designations rather than zoning, just because those are a little bit more reflective of where we want to see this type of housing in the future. So that's one change. Every project would still need to comply with all of the city's land use and development requirements. So if a project was proposed on a site that wasn't properly zoned, they would separately have to go apply for a zone change. So you don't need to worry about those kinds of things. And then because these maps are based on plan designation, if council wants to move forward with those, there might be a couple of changes to the boundaries that you're seeing tonight because of the comprehensive plan map clarification project. So there's still some changes going on with that property specific map. So we would have to kind of make sure that we were aligning with that. We've also simplified the boundaries. So I believe the prior maps that council had seen, there had been a little bit of analysis done about like what is development potential on individual sites. So we didn't do that this time. We're just kind of leaving that up to developers to determine what is the highest and best use for this property, as long as they're within the development code. And then finally, we just cleaned the map up some to make sure that it was really reflective of areas that are close to transit. That mostly impacted some areas on the southern part of Main Street that were actually outside of a quarter mile of transit, and then also the southern part of downtown down into like the Booth Kelly area, just because the train tracks are there. Those kind of present a barrier to accessing transit. So we just shortened that area a little bit. So then this is showing all of the areas that are currently under consideration based on council's past direction. So, and I have more zoomed in maps, so we'll get to those too, but Q Street between Pioneer Parkway and then kind of around 19th, I don't know when that turns into Mohawk, 19th/Mohawk, some areas along Mohawk, downtown, and then Main Street from about 38th to Bob's Traub. So I'll just flip through these quickly, but we can get back to any that folks want to look at more. I do have an interactive online map, but I couldn't get it to work and I couldn't get AJ logged in. So if anybody on council wants to see that, I can share that later as well. So then Main Street, Mohawk, and Q Street. And so the first question that staff has for council tonight is, does the council want to make any changes to these draft exemption areas? So again, these are areas council in the past has said, these are where we want to offer this tax exemption. We're just kind of drawing the boundaries a little bit differently.
Anybody? Steve?
Are we talking about the individual house building or multiple units?
Multiple unit.
Okay.
Yep, sorry about that.
Because of climate issue coming on, I would encourage building up the best we can and within a quarter mile of transit. That's what we have to do. So I don't have any draft exemption areas, but within.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. It's a good point. And one of the things that we'll talk about in May is what is the minimum number of units that we would want to require to be built.
No, I think we're
I'm
good.
good with this. This is
Yeah.
great.
So keep on going.
And that's the easy one.
I know.
Okay, so the next topic that I wanted to cover tonight is just talking a little bit about the fiscal impact of a tax exemption like this, because obviously if we're talking about exempting property taxes, there could be a fiscal impact to the city. I think that there are a couple of things to keep in mind when we're talking about this. So I like to think about this property tax exemption as kind of an exchange, as we're exempting property taxes, but we're getting something in return. And so the things that we'd be getting in return with this tax exemption are first, obviously, we're getting more housing units built. But within that, we may be getting housing units that we would not otherwise have seen, either because a project wouldn't be able to move forward without a financial incentive like this, or a developer may be able to build more units than they would have without the financial incentive. The next thing that the city would be getting is at least one public benefit from every project. As I mentioned, we'll get into that in May, but we get to kind of decide what is that public benefit. And then the last thing is obviously we're generating tax revenue. So especially for those projects that wouldn't have been built without this incentive, that's tax revenue the city would not have otherwise gotten. So by statute, cities can exempt property taxes for up to 10 years, unless it's for affordable housing, which it can go longer for that. But again, staff's not recommending using this tax exemption in that way. And it only exempts property taxes on new residential improvements. So land still gets taxed. Non-residential improvements are taxed with a couple of exceptions that I'll get into. And then any kind of existing improvements continue to be taxed. So if you were adding on an addition to a building, it would just be kind of those new improvements that we would be exempting. So the exceptions to residential improvements that can be exempted are residential parking that's part of those new improvements, and then also commercial space if it's being offered as a public benefit. So if the council said we don't want to offer commercial space as a public benefit, then we could specify that that wouldn't be exempt. And then this would only apply to the city's share of property taxes unless we're able to get support from other taxing districts that make up at least 51% of the tax levy. So for context, that would be basically the city and the school district, or the city, the county, and Willamette would get us to that 51%. And then other things to think about when we're talking about fiscal impact. So there are a couple different variables that would play into what the fiscal impact would be. So first, what are the characteristics of the projects themselves? So obviously, different sized multiple unit residential projects are going to have different assessed values, different taxes. There are a lot of different factors that go into that. Big ones being like how many units are being built and what are the sizes of those units, like how many bedrooms. And then the actual land that's being built on, that's also kind of a factor, because if it's being built on vacant land, the city is not kind of foregoing anything because we're still getting tax on land. So it would just be taxed as if nothing was built at all. If there were existing improvements on site that were raised, then we would be losing that tax revenue from what had been there. So where I see this maybe coming up would be like if there was a single family home on a large lot that was raised and replaced with like a small apartment building, we would in the short term be losing that revenue from the single family home. Obviously, if there are any improvements that are kept, we would still get those taxes. And then the other thing to think about is whether or not the council caps the program and how that would obviously have an impact on the city's revenue. And we'll come back to that question in a second. But first I wanted to get into some of the scenarios that are in your packet. I believe these are attachment 3. I've just included one on the slide here mainly for the purpose of making sure we're all on the same page about what these are showing. So I do want to thank Nick Riolo, who's here tonight in finance, who put these together for me. But basically, we just wanted to give council an idea of what it might look like to exempt taxes under this program. So all 3 of these examples are projects that have actually been built in Springfield in recent years. So we know that the market supports this type of housing because it's built. We tried to provide a range of like a small to a large development. So the other advantage of using projects that are actually built is that we know how the county assessor has valued them for tax purposes. So what we're doing here is assuming that if this project was built today, its assessed value would be what the assessor has actually put it at on this year's tax bill. And then we're kind of assuming a 3% growth in assessed value over the next several years. The other thing to note on here is that the property taxes are based on what the tax rate is right now. In real life, that may vary some as bonds expire and new bonds come on. But that's kind of something that we can't really predict ahead of time. So we've just held that tax rate constant. And then at the bottom, we're showing what the total property taxes exempted would be for this project over 10 years, and then what the city of Springfield's share of that would be. This doesn't include CETA, so that would be kind of an additional amount. And then the last column, the year 11 column, is showing kind of an idea of once that improvement comes onto the tax rolls and we do start collecting tax, what we would start collecting it at. The caveat there is that when a property tax exemption expires, the assessor will go out and reassess the value of that building. So that may go up or down, kind of dependent, again, on many factors, the market being one of them. So, but just to give everybody an idea of what we're talking about in terms of numbers. So then getting back to caps. So setting cap on the program could help limit the fiscal impact of it with a greater certainty. It could also be an opportunity for the council to determine what success for the program would look like and what might be an appropriate point to pause, reevaluate, end the program. And so I think getting into this cap discussion, it's good to sort of contextualize this in the broader housing work that the city is going to be required to do in the next couple of years. So there, at the state level, there is a lot coming down regarding housing production strategies, housing capacity analyses, and maybe, I don't know, other things. It's an active topic at the legislature right now. And so basically the gist of all that is that the city is going to hold cities more responsible for housing production, like actual numbers based. Here's a target amount of housing to have built. What are you, the city, doing to help build that number of housing units? Obviously there are forces going on outside of the city's control, like the market, but incentives like property tax exemptions and then kind of other steps to loosen regulations are the types of things the state's going to be looking for us to do to show our work towards housing production. And then through the housing production strategy, for example, we'll have like a required check-in with the state at a regular interval. So those will be more opportunities to evaluate what the city's doing and is that working. Of the programs that we reviewed, we only found 2 that currently have caps in place. So the city of Eugene has a unit-based cap that I think is tied to their comprehensive plan. And then the city of Portland has a financially based cap that's kind of a rolling limit on how much they'll exempt in a 5-year period of time. Then there are also a couple of cities that have language built into their code that kind of allows them to institute a cap by motion at any time. And that's option A in your packet. The city of Cottage Grove has that, for example, and their code language is in there. So the 2 options that I have up here are that option A of institute the option to put a cap in place whenever, and then option B here is written more as like a financially based cap, but as I mentioned, if the council wanted to consider other measures like number of units or maybe a time-based cap, those would be options as well. And so then getting to the question, basically what staff is hoping to get direction on from council is what type do you want to cap? If so, what type do you want to put an option in place to institute a cap? That's option A, or would you like to do that now? And if so, how do you, I have one more slide, if that's just because I know we'll be on
Questions are filtered up, and I'm like, answers are filtered up.
And then, so sort of the last thing here before we get into talking about that one is just kind of next steps. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about this more in May. We'll go back to that public benefit question. What does council want that to look like? And then also other minimum program standards. And then I think if council is wanting to move forward at that point, the next step would probably be to start reaching out to other taxing districts to gauge their support, and then start working on a draft code. And with that, back to the questions.
Thank you. I am excited about this and have been waiting for it to come back, because I know a lot of this work was done before I ever got onto council. I think it's the perfect time. I think that I like option A, which is the option to set a cap if we need to at some point, but wouldn't want to start out with a cap, because I'm really interested to see how developers and the market responds to the changes we've made to our code. And if we make it more friendly for folks to come and build, I'd love to see just how that works without us putting too many restrictions on that. And I'm really excited to talk about the benefits when we get to talk about those. I'm going to talk about those because I came with my list, but I'm excited about this.
I will, once we're done with this, I'm happy to take thoughts on that too, if we have time remaining to help build up that conversation.
All right, other questions? Comments?
I agree with Corey. I'd like to go with option A and just a little more flexibility on the, front end of this as we kind of learn what the impacts are going to be. I think is a good idea.
Victoria?
I agree as well. I think that it's too hard to have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen in the future. So we should leave our options open. So I'm supportive of A as well.
Yeah, and the thing I like about it is that this is something we've been looking at for a long time. And with, the additional housing requirements and housing work that's going to come from the state, this is going to help inform that, start checking off some of the policy decisions we're going to need to make in the next couple of years. Right. So it sounds like you've got direction.
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
Yes, I do. Okay. If you're gonna give this space, I do. So one of the things I do love about this program is that we get to hash out what we think are important public benefits. And I know that you all are recommending to just really focus on market rate housing, but I think of middle income or workforce housing as being perfect for this, which is what we do need a lot of. All of those sort of housing things I was really interested in. But I also think if we are going to meet the climate friendly and equitable cities, leaning into the bicycle and pedestrian amenities and figuring out what that might look like. I am all about also the childcare facilities. I would love to somehow incentivize childcare facilities. And I know that I think it's Homes for Good is working on a project in Eugene that includes childcare as part of it, which is co-located there. And I think that's really exciting. So those are just a few of the ones that, and I also I'm thinking of former Councilor Pitts and the sort of placemaking and the public spaces, and thinking about if we're really going to encourage dense housing, we also still want to have ways for people to feel like a community. So open. Yeah, it's not as though there was one on there that was placemaking and active public spaces. Yeah, so it wouldn't have to be like a park, but just ways for people, barbecue grills, or ways for people to get together and be in community. So yeah.
Residents.
Right. We still got a couple minutes left. Anybody else want to add? I think the next conversation is going to be really interesting, and I would love to hear from developers as far as, if we sort of hit the mark here. especially since we're crafting this based on codes that, programs that are found in the rest of the state. Right? Because we want them to use it and build plenty of housing. Right. And I think we will see you again very shortly.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Transportation funding is next.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Drew Larson, recent transportation planner for the city of Springfield. Tonight with me is Christy Kruger. And this evening, we are seeking council input to fill an existing funding gap for the Mill Street reconstruction project. To keep it short and sweet, I'm just going to read what I've prepared. Should be 5-10 minutes tops, 5 minutes most likely, to leave most time for council discussion as well as questions for Christy and myself. So with that, I will just jump right in. So in the past 5 to 6 years, the United States has experienced an unprecedented rise in delivering capital improvement projects, including Springfield's Mill Street reconstruction project. The Mill Street project includes a full rebuild of the right-of-way, including wastewater and stormwater line replacement, upgrading all intersections to meet the American Disabilities Act, lighting and pedestrian improvements, and required bicycle facilities. The Mill Street reconstruction project initially began back in 2018, and staff estimated that the roadway reconstruction, including the driving surface, bicycle facilities, and pedestrian enhancements, to be around $3.2 million. At that time, council directed staff to apply for federal funds to complete the project, and we were allocated $2.3 million in 2018. Subsequently, or today, Mill Street is currently at 30% design, and the cost estimate is approximately $17 million, which includes all aspects of the project, including the stormwater and wastewater replacement lines, new pedestrian facilities, traffic calming, the whole shebang for new reconstructed project. So based on the current allocated funds from both the city of Springfield, from the stormwater, wastewater, STC funds that we have, as well as federal funding from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, there is still a funding gap of approximately $5 million. So based on that estimate and knowing that Mill Street is a high priority for the city of Springfield, staff began to search for additional funding to fill that gap. So initially, the engineering staff did some value engineering to try to reduce the scope of the project, but we're unable to identify any significant cuts or reductions to the project that would achieve the funding gap. So the engineering team and planning staff looked to the Federal Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, allocated grant funding to fill the gap. Attachment 2 in the package tonight shows all the current projects funded by federal dollars and the status of each of those projects. All of the projects are currently in design except for the Q Street reconstruction project. Q Street reconstruction is from 5th Street to Pioneer Parkway East, and is slated to begin design in 2024. The attachment 2 also identifies all the federal funding types, including CMAQ, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, CRP funds, the Carbon Reduction Program, STBG, a number of those funds. And then on the bottom of that, it shows the ability to reallocate those funds from either easy to difficult. And the STBG, the surface transportation block grants, are the easiest those to reallocate. So we did look at those. In addition, the city manager's office has requested legislative earmark funds from both the state of Oregon and from the federal government to cover the existing funding gap. The state of Oregon request was for $2 million and the federal request was for $4 million. Staff's understanding is that we will hear on those from either this late spring or midsummer, possibly late summer. So while staff is optimistic about those earmark funds to cover the gap, Unfortunately, the project cannot move forward on its current timeline without being fully funded. So if council elects to wait on those earmark funds later this summer or possibly early spring, it would bump the Mill Street reconstruction, which is slated to be reconstruction to begin in 2024. It would bump it out to 2025. If we wait longer, looking even later. So in order to move forward with Mill Street on its current schedule, again, construction beginning 2024, staff is seeking direction from council tonight to request that the Transportation Planning Committee, that's the committee from the MPO that kind of helps allocate the federal funds, to one, cancel the Q Street project and reallocate the MPO discretionary funds from the Q Street project, is approximately $4.7 million to the Mill Street construction funds. Just one note on that, that if those earmark funds are successful, I have spoken with the MPO and the TPC, the Transportation Planning Committee, that if those earmark funds do become available, we could return back to TPC and reallocate those funds back to Q Street. So again, tonight we are seeking direction to cancel the Q Street project, reallocate to Mill Street to continue moving forward on its current timeline.
Corey,
So I heard all the things that you said. So even if you can't, you have to cancel the Q Street, I imagine, in order to reallocate the funding. If you cancel it, what's the promise that if the money comes, that would come back?
If the money comes,
If we get money in other ways, because you said if we get the earmarked funds, then we could return to Q Street in addition to this. So I'm just like, once we cancel it, my concern is it would be off the books and it would be hard to get it back on.
not necessarily. I spoke with the MPO folks, Dan Collister is who I typically communicate with, and because it was already a MPO federally supported project, that restarting that would not be an issue.
Because this is a hard one for me because Q Street is right through my ward and we're doing a lot of developing over there. However, I would support moving it to Mill Street because that's been in need for much longer. So
and I would think, well, a lot of us were there, the 2018 conversation with the public, and I don't think we would have gotten that bond without a commitment to Mill Street. And especially since we're on the cusp of beginning the conversation for another bond. We've got our promises to the public here. Can you, before I open up the conversation for other folks, I know there was a conversation this morning about other grant programs that we could pursue with federal DOT. Do we have any more information that we could share about that?
Yes, so there was one that was this was all part of the COVID relief money. One is called the Reconnecting Communities. That one is specifically like a reconnecting communities in which a transportation project has specifically split a community. So say like the 126 or the Beltline. I mean, in mine it was a brief research and a brief read into those things, but my understanding is that one I don't think would apply to the Mill Street. There is another one that sounded promising. You do have to show that the funding is traditionally or historically underserved communities. And actually the DOT, the Department of Transportation, had a map that showed districts in which those communities are. And this section of Mill Street was within one of those districts. And if you could show that it was in those districts, which it is based off of their map and my, brief research on it this morning, that you could potentially get upwards of 100% funding instead of having a local match.
So even if we pursued grant funding for Mill Street, right, we could still end up pushing it by 2025. Is that correct?
If we elect to not cancel the Q Street and reallocate those funds and go after grant money or waiting for the earmark funds, we will be looking at pushing it back.
Yeah, there's lots of other places to look for transportation funds, but we can't push us back to 25. Steve?
Remember, Mill Street was a single lane with 2 drainage ditches on both sides. Stormwater was not a problem in those days. I believe I've seen it reconstructed twice. I know for sure once, but my memory wants to tell me twice. It's a horrible shape for reconstruction. Your street's on an old roadbed, solid, and it's not deteriorating. Asphalt maybe, but the ground isn't. So I would say we put that one on.
Okay, so before I let other folks in here, AJ, are we gonna have to stop if you have to reset the PC here?
I need you to pause for a second.
Okay.
Are you already logged in?
Yeah. We're pausing for station identification.
You're dating yourself with that reference, Mayor. I got it, so I'm dating myself by saying that.
I was born last century.
Isn't it now you pause for streaming ads?
Buffering.
I'm gonna assume so. I need you to turn. I apologize, everyone. This countdown clock is working on my blood pressure. I am not able to stop what is happening, so we are trying to make a workaround. I apologize.
What happens when we get to zero?
I don't know. It all blows up. I don't know why I can't stop it. You want me to pause the recording?
I like Neil's.
Phones may or may not be working in this moment.
What just happened?
AJ, if you managed to pull this off, how quickly and effectively?
And I'll, as soon as we're up and going, I should also have Counselor Christian for you. Thank you for everyone's patience.
You're doing great. I'm happy to be sitting here and not there.
Do you have audio? We might make this thing screen and hear myself. Neil, I'm gonna jump on you. And it may make your screen.
Did we just do that and not lose any of the people that were already logged into this meeting?
That would be correct.
In our next act, we're gonna keep talking about Hill Street.
I apologize for the interruption.
All right, other questions from council?
I just have a question. One. So reallocating these Q Street funds still leaves a shortfall of about 290,000. So I assume city funds will fill that gap.
Correct. Yeah, Jeff was working on finding those funds with Christie, so yeah, they're confident that those funds are available.
So mine's more of just a comment as a person who's been in public works for about 10 years. And I think I just want to say this out loud for anybody who's watching this or listening. This is why we have a road bond. This is why we need to fix roads before we get to this place where stuff is underneath is messed up. And so I applaud you for taking care of this when you know, with what you have. And I support go forth and fix. We've got to do this, but this is the cost to people that don't want to pay for fixing roads at a time when they could be fixed and saved before we have to dig into the ground and repair everything underneath. So.
All right, so do we have to take formal action? So you guys have enough to go run? Perfect.
Yeah, we do.
Well, hopefully we'll do very well with congressionally directed spending, and then we can put the money back and fix more than one road.
Yay.
That would be nice.
And maybe we'll come in under budget on Mill Street and move some to Q Street.
We're gonna get that, like, we are gonna get this thing done, like Mill Street will be off of this.
Whenever this road bond comes around.
All right, well, thank you much.
Thank you.
Great night. Thank you.
All right, so we are supposed doing the math and because we're supposed to be moving on to interviews, and we are probably a half an hour.
45 minutes ahead.
So do we have anybody here? Because we told them probably.
7 o'clock. Overachiever.
Hey, you need a-
45-minute
Jenna, do you need to go?
Talk about yourself.
I will say that also, there were also virtual attendees. We have other gold stars.
So then we are going to, I guess, take a brief recess. And we will see when people start showing up, and if we can move around, if we've got kind of enough of the applicants here to get started on one of these, then we'll start early. So we will check in with you guys, probably 20 minutes.
Perfect.
Yep, all right. Thank you. All right, we are coming back out of recess for the city council work session so that we can go into committee interviews. The first committee interviews looks like they are the police advisory committee. So, you want to come on up?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Monroe with the Springfield Police Department. The Springfield Police Advisory Committee currently has a vacancy for a local faith community representative. The vacancy was created due to the expiration of committee members' 4-year term in May of this year. The city received 3 applications for the faith community representative position. The applications were received from Daniel Davidson, Jason Miller, and Jason Mitchell.
Okay, and it's 3 applicants for 1 position.
Correct.
And then after this, you'll be full up for
For a little while, I think. At least a year or so.
knock on wood. I know
Yes,
that's-
right. The first applicant is Daniel Davidson.
Come on up. All right, Daniel, we're gonna do a quick round of introductions and then I'm gonna ask all the questions. So we have about 1 million interviews tonight, so it helps go along a little bit quicker. Do you want to start, Victoria?
You just introducing myself?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Victoria. We've met.
Yes.
I am a representative for Ward 5, which is up near Thurston area.
Appreciate you representing where our
Thank you.
church is.
Michelle Weber, Ward 1, the Gateway, Hayden Bridge, that zone.
Steve O, Ward 2.
I'm Corey Rodley, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm Ward 3, which is right up the middle of the city.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor. What perspective, experience, or expertise will you bring to the Police Advisory Committee?
I was raised in a police officer home. And so at an early age, I've got very familiar with that lifestyle and just all that goes into that. Also, I've been in touch with the police department, particularly Don Hanson, just in being involved in the peer support group at some level and been passionate about the police for a lot of years with that upbringing and been in the community for about 20 years, raised a family here. And so very familiar with what goes on at ground level, raising a family and pastoring a church.
Perfect. What is your perception of the Springfield Police Department, and have you any personal interactions with the Springfield PD?
I went on a ride along a couple weeks ago, thoroughly enjoyed the time with Larry Turner. And every time that my kids see an officer, they're nudging me saying, can we go and talk to the policeman or the police officer? And so that's led to some interaction, had a good interaction with Joseph Burke. And he's the one who actually recommended this back in December. And that was my 8-year-old that prompted that. And so I've thoroughly enjoyed just the interaction and look for every opportunity I can.
And what do you think the most important issues facing the Springfield Police Department are today?
Well, and just obviously the protests of 2020 and some of the concerns, even here in Springfield and in the Thurston area, obviously that fractured a lot of opinions about the police department. And so I believe police need a good feedback and good support. And I want our people to really respect the men and women in blue. I think that's very important.
And what do you think the most important steps the police department could take to promote a positive relationship with the Springfield community are?
I think there's an emphasis on public relations, and I think that's going very well. And I mean, just seeing the interaction between officers and my children when they interact. And I think that's going in a very healthy direction as far as just the public relations and the de-escalation emphasis at times when tension is building.
Perfect. That was the last question. They were pretty darn quick.
Okay.
So we're good. We appreciate the time. We'll have somebody get back to you as soon as we make a decision.
And thank you for considering me.
Thank you.
Our next applicant is Jason Miller.
Hello. Hello, Jason. Are you ready to get going with the questions?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. What perspective, expertise, or experiences will you bring to the Police Advisory Committee?
Yeah, so I put on my application that I did study abroad on community, and especially for this position on faith. I went to Europe and we spoke to the Catholics and the Irish and why they were fighting, and saw kind of an interesting perspective on when people don't listen to each other. And so I think when it comes to our community and the police and very wanting to be integrated into the community and to serve the community, that people just need to listen to each other.
What is your perception of the Springfield Police Department, and have you had any personal interactions with the SPD?
Yeah, very positive interaction. One thing I do, I listen to a lot of Small Town Dicks. I know that even though they talk about it, not what city it's from. If you live here, you know. I've told a lot of people to listen to the one episode about the shooting on 126, the officer there. I think that's very powerful. I brought my kids to the Springfield jail a few times when they have the public stuff, and had great interactions, got a few pictures of them in the prison there. And told them I hope that's the last time we see them there. But yeah, always positive interactions with the police.
What do you think the most important issues facing the SPD today are?
One, I think, maybe burnout with police officers. It's a very tough job. It's not getting any easier. There's been, like we saw, like Daniel mentioned with 2020, just maybe some negative aspects that people would just talk about the profession. And so I think getting good quality officers into the position, interested in working, finding, I think everywhere you're trying to find good workers. At my company, we talk about butts and trucks and getting people. So I think getting people interested in the work, the right type of people.
Well, what do you think are important steps that PD can take to promote a positive relationship with the Springfield community?
I think being out and about in the community, not just for trying to make sure laws are being followed or whatever, arrests and that sort of thing, but truly being a part in the community, listening to people, hearing where their lives are coming from will help when they're doing the other side of the job when arrests and things need to take place. It's kind of a two-way street of understanding, listening.
Great. Thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Our final applicant is Jason Mitchell.
Good evening.
Jason's a popular name tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Are you ready for your first question?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What perspective, experience, or expertise will you bring to the Police Advisory Committee?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience being on committees, being a part of churches for a long time, pastoring. Churches are known for their committees. They start committees for everything we do. So there's a way committees function. There's a mutual respect that you need on a committee. So not only do I have experience on committee, but I also have that experience with people here in Springfield. Our church serves a wide berth of people. And so there's different kinds of people who I get to interact with every day and get to hear their feedback of how their experiences are in the community, how their experiences are working for the city, working in different businesses. So bring that together to be able to support the police department is the perspective that I think that I bring to this position.
And what is your perception of SPD? And have you had any personal interactions with the police department?
Yeah, I have a very positive perception. Most of my interactions been out in the community events, going to things like the police Christmas breakfast back when they had that, seeing them around town, seeing the events like the Project Hope fairs that we've partnered with and been there, getting talked to officers. We've had an officer out for a training event at our church as well. Just trying to make sure our church is aware of how we can be a safe spot as well. So mostly just interactions about town, and it's been very positive, nothing but great interactions with the police.
And what do you think the most important issues facing SPD are today?
I think one of the most important issues and the hardest ones is just public perception. There's an issue with public perception these days, especially from the younger generations of how the police are. And a lot of it, I believe, is misguided. So working on that public perception, making sure that there's ways to have opportunities for people to hear about who the police are and what they're doing. There's a gap in some information there sometimes. I know when we had the training at our church, I heard that at any given time, there's only 6 officers in Springfield that are working and active working. And that shocked me. I had no idea. That changes your perception of how you view things then. When you know that if there's a domestic violence dispute, that 2 officers go to that. Now there's 4 officers covering all of Springfield. So it gives you a little bit more empathy for the job, for what they're dealing with. So I think a public perception, trying to help people understand the job and what they're doing, the care that the officers have for our city, and help them understand and see that most officers really are great men and women who care deeply for our city and protecting it and work really hard at their job and carry a big weight with that position.
What do you think are the most important steps the police department can do to promote a positive relationship with the Springfield community?
Yeah, it's the things that I've seen them doing. It's things, being at events like Project Hope, like I said, doing the coffee with the police, those times where people can have interactions with them that are positive, I think are really helpful in building that trust and building the understanding of who the police are and that these are men and women. They're not just, people who work a job, but that they have personalities, they have families. They're deeper than just what the position is. So when we can find opportunities to bridge that gap between the community and the officers, I think that really will help lead to those positive interactions.
All right, great. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay. We gotta give them one name. So what are people thinking?
That's gonna be really hard.
No. That's part of the great thing about having so many applicants, great applicants.
Yes.
The other choice we could make is we could come back after 20 interviews and try to remember who folks are.
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
My number one choice is Jason Mitchell.
Okay.
And my vote is for Mr. Davidson.
Mhm.
I just want to say thank you to all three of you for coming in and interviewing with us. It was just, thank you for that. My vote also goes to Jason Mitchell.
It's a really hard decision. Very hard. Very good, very qualified people. But Mr. Davidson's got some, grew up in a home with police, which gives him a real good view of what's going on out there. So I would suggest him.
Mayor.
I had Daniel in the top of my list, so if you can move Daniel forward. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
And please keep applying because there was only one.
Yeah. We should have open spots, so if you want to hang around, we can volunteer you guys for.
We have all kinds of committees we're interviewing.
I think you are interviewing for another one, so we've got a second chance.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you can check with them, if all of her interviews are here, if they are not, then we've got Neil.
Michelle.
All right.
You too. We're all just trying to like navigate the awkward, yeah, so.
Yeah, I know.
I appreciate you, like.
Thank you. I mean, I know. It's really good. You know, they're sitting there as a speaker.
So good job. Thanks for
We do
providing us
paper,
with that.
scissors.
Oh, is that right? Is that tonight too?
So is this a hot seat?
We hope it's not too hot. Mildly warm.
Here. Do we have both folks?
Yes, she'll be hanging out outside and
Oh. And you'll be like.
we'll see. Yeah, Erin Fifield with, or, yeah, we good? Sorry, thank you. With the Community Development Advisory Committee applicant interviews, we have one open position, and we have two applicants. And the one open position is for an applicant who you selected for, they're all equal, the Planning Commission. So there's actually a 3-year vacancy that you'll be selecting someone for tonight.
You noticed that she got out of the way pretty quick.
Yeah.
Do you know everybody? Or would a round of introduction help you hurry?
I mean, I've watched, but I don't know if everybody. That's fine.
All right. Then we'll jump into the questions. What do you know about community development block grants, and what is your understanding of the purpose of the committee?
I know that it's always really hard to say, and everybody does it all in the wrong order every time. It's a federal grant program that operates a little bit different than other federal programs. There's some special opportunities that come with it, including possibility to match with other federal funds. The highlights for it are community development, especially around removing blight and revitalizing areas and housing. And it's available to all cities, but some manage it through smaller communities, manage it through other entities, often including the state. What was the second word?
And what is your understanding of the purpose of the committee?
Oh. The purpose of the committee is to help evaluate the applications, while also to promote the program and make sure that there are folks out there who have projects that might be appropriate for the program, are aware of it and can access
What interests you about affordable housing and community development?
it. Everything. I mean, affordable housing is the need everywhere in the state. We see it in this community. Certainly, we've also seen some really great projects happen in Springfield, some of which were funded in part by these grant dollars. I think everybody should have a place to live, and it's hard to find that, even not so affordably anymore. So it's going to be these kinds of projects will have a really big impact on individuals, but as a community as well.
What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Springfield in the realm of housing and community development?
If you didn't narrow that down. I think there are challenges with accessibility to housing, with maintaining affordable housing, with keeping people in their houses, if they already have housing. So those are important things to consider, so that we don't continue to grow the problem while we're solving the problem.
Because resources are limited, some worthwhile projects may not get funded. How would you decide which projects receive funding and which do not?
Well, I guess first I would pay attention to what the grant requirements are and the purpose of the grant program to make sure that we are meeting those requirements and that we can stay in good standing and continue to receive that funding. That would be my first level. And then I would base other decisions on the city goals, the direction of city council, and then based on the completeness of the applications and how they demonstrate in the application that they are meeting the requirements.
That was my last question. Thank you so much. It's good seeing you. We will make a decision and somebody will be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thank you. Is that correct?
She was on the historic commission the first year I was on the historic commission.
Also grants and outreach coordinator.
Hello. We're going to go around and do a quick round of introductions, and then we will get started with a couple of questions, and we'll start down with Victoria.
I'm Victoria Doyle. I'm Ward 5, which is up near the Thurston area, not way up, but kind of a little bit further down. So
Michelle Weber, Ward 1, Gateway, Hayden Bridge area.
Steve Moe, Ward 2, West Springfield.
Corey Rodley, she, her, and hers, and we know each other. Ward 3 is mine.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor. And I see that Councilor Piscineri has made it.
Yep, Joe Piscineri, Ward 6 out of Thurston area.
Okay, so the plan is we've got a ton of applicants tonight, so I'm going to ask a set of 4 questions. Everybody's going to take notes, and then we'll decide if we get done. Ready? What do you know about the community development block grant, and what is your understanding of the purpose of this committee?
Oh, I've actually applied for the community development block grant prior. I work at shelter care, so we have used it to repair the roofing on some of our housing projects, as well as putting in new flooring. So we've used it in the case to better housing that was already in place, but I know that it is here as well. We base it on the 5-year plan of creating more affordable housing, repairing current supply, and also removing slum conditions. So bettering the housing supply and also making more.
Okay, great. What interests you about affordable housing and community development?
So housing is actually my main interest and how I also got to Oregon. I was interested in working in housing since about age 13. And I moved to Oregon and did Masters in Nonprofit Management at the U of O. And then have been at Shelter Care now for 5 years. So I 100% believe in affordable housing. I believe that everybody deserves a safe place to sleep at night. And I believe as a community, we take that task on and ensuring that everybody has that.
What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Springfield in the realm of housing and community development?
Creating more housing. It's just needed, both Springfield and Eugene. We haven't kept up with the population growth. We don't have a lot of affordable housing. We don't have a supply of housing to even prepare us for the next population of people that are coming in. So we're short all around on units.
Because resources are so limited, some worthwhile projects may not get funded. How would you decide which projects receive funding and which do not?
Well, I wouldn't decide, we decide as a committee. It's never up to just one person, hopefully. To me, I generally look at what is long-term sustainable because the money is often one-time things, as I've found in programs that I've worked in. You got to look at the future, what is going to be sustained the longest and what is also going to provide the most long-term outcomes for a larger number of individuals.
Great, that was my last question. So we are going to decide who we're going to appoint, and then somebody will be in contact with you with the decision. Thank you so much for coming in this evening.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right, so one spot between the two of them. And all right, who wants to jump in first?
Do we just do a vote?
Well, we're not voting, we're sort of deciding who to move forward to the regular session. So just share your opinion. What's your preference?
So I thought Katrina had some very concise answers and she has a lot of experience. It sounds like she's really familiar with the whole process and has some a pretty good outlook for our community and sees the issues. So just I've noticed.
Michelle?
I would agree. I felt she gave the more clear, detailed answers to the questions that were asked.
Agreed.
Well, I think they're both great, and I also am leaning towards Katrina, but I think Curry would also be fantastic. So.
Okay, Joe, I don't know how much you heard because you just got on.
Are you laying on the ground?
No, I actually not. That's that's a wall behind me. Anyway, it's snowing like crazy. I only caught a few responses that she had. I didn't catch the previous one. The impression I have on this last one is that everything above else is about affordable housing. That's what I got.
Yeah, and
Not much help.
Katrina's fine. And I think she'll do a great job. When it comes to this broader committee, I think we always want to make sure that we balance the housing and the community development too, and make sure we, have a lot of projects to choose from.
So was Katrina the last one?
Yep.
And what was the name of the previous one right before her?
She's,
Corey. I know Corey. Yep.
okay.
Isn't Corey? I'm sorry to interrupt again. Isn't Corey? She is already on it and extending her current. Is she done it again?
Curry. And she was on the planning commission and she just rotated off the planning commission. So she wasn't previously on it.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, then we are good with that one.
Perfect.
All right.
That's Katrina down for CDAC for the April 3rd.
Outstanding.
Perfect.
Thanks, Aaron.
Comment you have for everyone? So historic commission.
Hi, Tom Severs, Senior Planner and Current Planning Historic Commission. We have one open seat in the Historic Commission and we have one commissioner applying for reassignment or assignment, extending her position. We'll be calling her up first. It's Jenna Fribley. And we have two others, Mason Shannon and Kara Leslie. This one position opened up. Commissioner Leslie McLeese resigned in December, so that opened our one seat.
Thank you so much.
Jenna?
And do we need to go around and introduce everybody? Okay. Why are you interested in serving on the historic commission?
So I'm a local architect. I'm very involved in downtown adaptive reuse projects and revitalization work. And I've been on the historic commission. I should know how many years, but I remember a handful of years now, and have enjoyed my time on it, and have been involved in a variety of our committee work, including the most recent Heritage Awards. That work and the historic district postcards. If you don't have them and you haven't seen it, feel free to request. I'm really, I guess, excited, and I think it's very important to do a lot of public outreach and education around the historic assets that we have in Springfield to promote stewardship and like an attitude and celebration of stewardship.
Can you give us an example of your experience working with the committee? Done and done. How do you think the work of the historic committee will improve the community?
Again, I think it's really critical that as we're trying to revitalize downtown, and not just downtown. My office is downtown, so I do a lot of downtown work, but all of Springfield. As we move forward and the city grows and evolves, that we, retain the historic fabric, architectural fabric that we do have, and incorporate that, I guess, into our vision for the long term to retain that, the character that we have, the positive character that we do have.
Great, thank you so much. I had 3 down. You got through 3 of them.
7 on my list. Does anybody want those things?
I do want one. I missed the last one.
Next, we have Kara Leslie.
That's okay.
Hello.
Hi.
We're gonna go around and do a quick round of introductions.
Okay.
And then, because we have a lot of applicants tonight, I'm just gonna ask all the questions. And then we'll have a discussion about the department after this. Victoria, do you want to start?
I'm Victoria. I'm the representative for Ward 5 up near Thurston, not all the way in Thurston, but near Thurston.
Michelle Weber, Ward 1, Gateway, Gateway Bridge area.
Steve Vogt, Ward 2, West Springfield.
I'm Coy Rodley. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm in Ward 3, which kind of goes right up the middle.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor. And Councilor Pictionary.
Joe Pictionary, I'm Ward 6 of Thurston area.
Okay, are you ready for your questions?
Yes.
All right. Why are you interested in serving on the Historic Commission?
Well, history and historic preservation and adaptive reuse are things that are my educational background and professional background, and just something that I'm interested in and passionate about. So I have I guess I should, my name's Kara Leslie. And I got my master's in public history from Portland State. After that, I went to work in Medford at the Southern Oregon Historical Society, and recently moved, well, about a year ago, it moved from Medford and came up here, and I'm currently working for the Oregon Health Authority and working remotely, but I really miss history, and I really miss dealing with these types of issues. And that's why when I saw this, I just kind of keep my my eyes peeled for opportunities that pop up that get involved, whether they're volunteer or whether they're committees, or in whatever capacity I can be involved and meet other people who are interested in history and historic preservation. And so I happened to see this posting and I applied for it.
Can you give us an example of your experience working with a committee?
Sure. Let's see. Well, at my previous position, as I mentioned, I was I guess technically my title was archivist, but it was a nonprofit where I wore a lot of different hats. And so I was on the museum committee and the collections committee. And I also worked with the other committees, such as we had a living farm that was a history farm, living history farm that was part of the organization. And there was a historic farm committee and events committee. So for the 3 years that I was down there, I guess the way we were structured, I wasn't really in charge of the committees, but I was somebody who worked with all of them and helped coordinate among them and helped to see that one hand knew what the other hand was doing. And then, as I said, I also served on the committees. And let's see, I'm currently serving on, it's a little bit different, but I'm serving on a few boards as well, or I served on the Jackson County Cultural Commission while I was down there, and we helped oversee grant distribution. And let's see, I guess that's mostly covers my experience with committees.
How do you think the work of the Historic Commission will improve our community?
I guess this is the meat and potatoes, what I want to say. I have only lived in Springfield for a year. I'm from Portland originally, and then, as I said, I lived in Southern Oregon, and recently work brought me here. But I am really, really excited about what's going on in Springfield. I grew up in Portland, but my foster brother, who's quite a few years older than I am, has lived in Springfield for a long time. And I grew up visiting him down here, and I've seen the changes that have happened to the city. And when I was looking at moving back here, I was really blown away with the downtown and the revitalization that's happened. And also the revitalization that has really taken careful consideration of reuse of the existing buildings. And I think that I've been impressed with the way that the city's been able to add new businesses and revitalize and make the downtown vibrant while also, keeping the character of buildings from different styles and from, the late 1800s, early 1900s, mid-century. And one thing that I got really interested in too while I was in Medford was like the future of small cities. Because I think that there's really a lot of potential there. And it's something that, had I stayed in Medford, I would have liked to have pursued further, getting more involved with their historic downtown. But so many people are being priced out of large cities. And at the same time, there's so much remote work, and a lot of us have seen over the pandemic that it's possible to live in smaller cities and also work for some of these in industries that you used to have to live in a major city. So I think that it's going to be interesting over the next 10, 20, 30 years to see how small cities develop and thrive in the US. And the historic commissions are going to be, I think the Historic Commission, because it works so closely with the Development Commission and other citywide organizations, are going to be really crucial to that. I think I say historic preservation. Sometimes when you say that, people think that it means that necessarily that you're always preserve a building no matter what. And that's not necessarily true. But I think just on a personal level, I just wanted to mention that I also worked for the city of Salem for a while. That was one of my previous positions. And my task was to do cultural resource inventories and go around and take pictures of buildings and assess them. And I absolutely loved it. And that's why I'm still hoping to, kind of keep my toe in that water. But one of the things that I found, through talking to people there and through talking to people through my time in graduate school and at architectural history conferences was how important it is to keep sort of a mixed, I guess like for the landscape to have interesting architecture, and everyone's definition of interesting is different, but that's why I say that it's neat that here in Springfield, there are different types of buildings. It's not all from one period, and that's been able to be preserved. And it really adds to the experience that one has when they're walking down the streets in, and not just downtown, also of course in Washburn. And, you know, I know there's changes happening in the Gateway area too. I live pretty close over there, and that statue that beckons you as you come in is a really neat thing. And I know it's only phase 1 of the project, but yeah, I'm just excited to see where Springfield can go and where other small cities can go. And I think the Historic Commission, I'd like to be involved in it in that sense.
Perfect. Well, thank you. That was my last question. I know you're coming back for the museum committee here in a little bit, so we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last we have Mason Shannon. Go ahead.
Good. How about you? We're gonna do a quick round of intros. We'll start with Victoria.
Hey, Victoria, I think you were sitting in here, so you've heard.
I
me
was,
word.
yeah.
Oh,
Very heard us.
I didn't see you speak.
Like,
All right. And if we're good, we're gonna get into the questions. Why are you interested in serving on the Historic Commission?
My family and I moved here about 9 months ago from Bend and bought a house block down in the historic district. I grew up in a house in the historic district in Bend, and it's always intrigued me. We bought the place more or less sight unseen, loved the neighborhood, and then moved in and then didn't realize that downtown Springfield was a block and a half down, and went walking down through downtown Springfield, and we're also impressed with the renovation work that's been done and the restoration that's been done, and got really excited about some of the projects that are in progress. And so since then, I've just been looking to get involved one way or another with the city and the city happenings, and seemed like a good fit.
Can you give us an example of your experience working with the committee?
Yeah, my resume is not that of the other two applicants as far as committee work goes directly. With my employer, I'm involved in our committee, our diversity committee. I'm very involved with like our senior leadership team and diversity and implementing diversity across our organization. I also, I work with my kids' schools on the PTA boards and stuff like that. So familiar with teamwork environments as far as that goes.
And how do you think the work of the Historic Commission will improve our community?
Yeah, I think education's a really big one. I think like that postcard is really neat, and just like walking through the historic district to school every day. And I think there's a lot on the residential side and education on the residential side that could be done to help those that own homes in the residential district, and then those that have businesses downtown. I've talked to a couple of business owners downtown about like what's happening downtown. Like, is there a downtown association? Is there stuff going on to like help kind of foster this positive path that downtown is going on? And I think that's very appealing to me, is to kind of help educate, work together as like a community to elevate overall the historic charm of the city.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. There's a couple, it's one position and there will be. Just checking here. Kira is coming back from museum committee.
So I'm the liaison with the Historic Commission, and I've been to several meetings. Also, I met with the chairperson just to kind of talk about their goals and what they're doing. And I've worked with Jenna, and her dedication is second to none. I can't imagine that we wouldn't re-up her. She's just great. And so my vote would be for her to re-up her. And then my second vote would be for Mason, primarily because he got the education part. And that's something that they talk about a lot, is that we are educating people about what the historic portion of that. I think that what he may lack in experience, he'll pick up on that committee. So that would be that's just my 2 cents.
Cory?
Jenna's also on the museum committee, right? Yes.
Probably.
My vote is for Kira.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Right,
No, I'm definitely support Jenna. I'm kind of still trying to process between the other two, kind of where my.
we only have one position.
Oh, yeah,
so-
sorry.
It's
One
for
reappointment.
reappointment with Jenna, which
And the other
Plus-
one.
plus.
Right.
Okay, so it's,
that backfilling Commissioner McKee's seat.
got it. So one reappointment and one actual, okay. Joe?
Yeah, I concur. Jenna should stay. She's obviously got some tenure there and I see no problem listening to what Victoria said and, you know, that makes sense to me. I also think that Mason Shannon would be a good add because I think he throws some different views into it, kind of balances out that commission.
Yes, and I like that too, that was quite a bit. When I like, here is a great option. But when I really listen to her interest, I'm looking forward to interviewing her for museum committee.
Yeah, and I'm.
All right,
So I hear reappointment of Jenna Fribley and a new appointment for Mason Shannon.
correct.
Perfect. We will get the museum committee in next.
Because this is the halfway point. So if anybody wants 5 to stretch their legs, I'm looking around. Okay. Thank you.
Guys.
We saved the chair for you, Mary.
Here, either one. Okay.
He's not laying down, even though he looks like it.
Well, now I think he's laying down.
I'm not, those are skylights right there.
Okay. So you were introducing the folks?
Yeah, can you remind me who we have on first? That would be Joshua Cap. Okay. So our first person, we have 3 folks interviewing tonight. One is reapplying. And Joshua Cap is a new applicant and he is waiting outside right now.
Okay,
We
so
have 3 openings, right?
Yes.
Which commission?
Museum.
This is
committee.
for museum. Okay.
Yes.
1 reappointment and 2.
Two new.
Okay. Perfect.
And that reappointment, who was that reappointment, please? I don't have my notes with me, sorry.
Tara.
Yeah, Tara Bouya is the reappointment.
Okay, got it. She's number 5 on that list there then. Thanks.
All right, I think we are ready for the first person. Right. Over there. All right. Hi. All right, Josh. So the game plan is we're gonna go around, we're gonna do a round of introductions. I've got 3 questions that I'm gonna ask you. We've got a ton of interviews tonight, so I'm gonna ask all the questions. And they're gonna take notes, and then we'll decide on the appointments after that. Victoria?
I am Victoria. I am in I represent Ward 5, which is the Thurston sort of middle area.
Michelle Weber, Ward 1, Gateway Hayden Bridge area.
Debo, Ward 2, West Springfield.
I'm Corey Rodley. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm Ward 3, which kind of goes right up the middle of the city.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor.
Joe Pishneri, Ward 6 out of Thurston area.
Why are you interested in serving on the museum committee?
Sure. So public service is a big part of my life. It always has been. I started volunteering when I was in high school and I'm well beyond high school. But ever since I've been in high school, I found ways to give back to my community no matter where I live. And I'd like to continue down that path. I specifically want to volunteer for History Museum committee because I understand and appreciate the value of preserving the past, but also the present for the future. I always think of stories in the news, you know, of when, oh, a community has found a time capsule. Well, our history museum can be that time capsule for people. So that's why
The Springfield Museum has a rotating exhibit space. One of the roles of the committee is to make recommendations for exhibits and programs. Can you give us an example of an exhibit you might recommend for the museum?
Sure. So Maddie and I, we were actually just talking outside. What I really appreciated, I've been in the museum recently. The labor exhibit that's there, I feel is a very important piece of living history. That's something that I feel that people sometimes overlook, the present or the future. So as a way to also, I know that we're limited in space, doing these sort of living history projects, you know, depending on whatever topic you can think of beyond, you know, labor that's currently there. I think continuing along that track will be beneficial, not only to preserve things for the future, but to also have an archive developed for the present and for the future.
And how do you think the work of the Springfield History Museum improves our community?
Well, I did some notes and, yeah, it all stems back to, you know, a museum provides a gateway to the past. I think it's imperative that, you know, our town is pretty old. And having this museum in place it provides a gateway into where we've gone and where we're going. And on a personal note, we brought our daughter to the museum a couple of weeks ago and just seeing her eyes light up at the kids exhibit, just that was it. She's like, she'll be going back there for life.
Great. Well, those were my 3 questions.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time, and then we will have somebody contact you with our decision.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yes.
Hello again.
Hello again. Well, we can skip the introductions. Why are you interested in serving on the museum committee?
Well, similar to the reasons that I'm interested in the historic commission. I love history. I love local history. As I mentioned, it's I have a master's degree in public history, which the idea behind it, at least as I was taught it at Portland State, is that it kind of prepares you for a career in history, but public facing. So I do, while I do love research and, you know, whiling away over microfilm and archival materials and whatnot, at the same time, I like sharing it with people too. And so it sounded like the History Museum is probably one of the best ways to do that.
The Springfield Museum has rotating exhibit space. One of the roles of the committee is to make recommendations for exhibits and programs. Can you give us an example of an exhibit you might recommend?
An exhibit that I might recommend. Well, I can't say whether or not this has already been done. So, you know, with bearing that in mind, I would probably recommend doing an exhibit that has to do with, well, I was going to go with timber. I'm sure that has been done, but still it's, you know, it's kind of crucial.
And I think that there are ways that we could bring the logging industry and the history of the logging industry and what it's doing today and weave that story in with the current economy, as well as focus on some of the immigrant communities and some of the non-white communities who were involved in these industries as well, because that is kind of something that a lot of telling stories that haven't been told as frequently is such an important part of history, particularly right now. And so I think that if you took something like logging that people tend to think like, oh, that's old fashioned history. I think that the exhibit could be told in a way that also brings in these equity pieces and also brings in labor pieces, also brings in science, and also connects to some of the current industries here today.
How do you think the work of the Springfield History Museum improves our community?
Well, we just had an opportunity to talk a little bit outside, so I might be cheating a little, but but Maddie was mentioning that working with the library has been really crucial for sort of engagement and also for some programming. And so in terms of, I'm sorry, could you repeat the exact question?
How do you think the work of the Springfield History Museum improves our community?
I think that when people have a history museum, it just gives them some sort of focal point, some sort of meaning for the city. And they look to it as a place that sometimes taken for granted, probably often taken for granted, actually. But when you don't have one, as I said, in Medford, we were constantly struggling to get the museum back up and running. And it was a real loss to the community because it was the place that generations of Medford people remembered going as kids and learning about history and first getting interested in it. And I mean, I myself, that's how I got interested in history, was going to history museums, especially ones with, hands-on interactive exhibits. And so I think that for the Springfield History Museum, just getting kids interested in local history is, I mean, it's a great introduction, and it's something that is going to spark their interest for the rest of their lives.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next applicant is actually virtually and online. So it'll take just a moment to promote her so that she can come up on screen.
Hello.
Hello. So,
Thank you for letting me join virtually.
well, we're happy to have you. We're going to go around and do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get into the questions.
Sounds good.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I represent Ward 5 up in the Mid-Thurston area.
Michelle Weber, Ward 1, Springfield Gateway area, or the Gateway Hayden Bridge area.
Steve Bull, Springfield, Ward 2, West Springfield.
I'm Coy Rodley. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm Ward 3.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor.
Joe Pishneri, Ward 6, be the Thurston area.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Why are you interested in serving on the museum committee?
So I'm applying for reappointment. I apologize for missing my appointment before I was recovering from brain surgery, but I'm well, I'm back. And the reason I want to continue to serve on the museum committee is this is my field of expertise. I work as a preservation specialist for the Northeast Document Conservation Center. And prior to that, I was the collections manager at the Lane County History Museum. So, and my education as well, I have degrees in museum studies and preventive conservation. So this really is where I work. I work in museums, I consult with museums. My specialty is collections care. And I do want to contribute to my community. I've lived here for about 13 years here in Springfield. And since I'm here, I work remotely for a firm that's in Massachusetts. I want to be able to share with my local community the information that I share on a daily basis with people all around the country. And I love teaching, I love sharing, and I love museums. So that's why I want to continue to work with the museum committee.
The Springfield Museum has a rotating exhibit space. One of the roles of the committee is to make recommendations for that exhibit space. Can you give us an example of an exhibit you might recommend?
Okay, so I grew up in the Philippines, and as you know, having grown up in another country, I've experienced seeing history from different people's perspectives and how it doesn't always match and it's not always the same. So I think it's really good the direction that the museum is taking now, where they're trying to kind of shed light on untold stories and underrepresented communities. So I'd like to continue with that. And so that we can see different parts of history and not just focus on the traditional settlers, pioneer story that has been on the forefront in this side. And on a side note to that, I'd also like to, I don't know if this is something that I do. I like to teach. So maybe help people learn how to share their own family histories or to care for their own personal collections so that these can live forward, and maybe they can collaborate with the museum, and we can learn individual stories since everybody has their own perspective.
How do you think the work of the Springfield History Museum improves the community?
It's very important for the community to have a museum because it's a touch point. It's a place of education. People can learn about different perspectives that they might not have in their own life. It's a community gathering space where people can meet each other. I just had an experience the other day with the town hall, and I got to meet some people who lived in the area who had common interests, and it was a very nice experience chatting with them and learning about people around the area. So I think it's a really core resource and a very important resource for our community to have.
All right, that was it. That was all the questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much too. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so we have 3 people and 3 positions.
I'm good with all three of them.
I think it's two, yeah.
Oh,
So it's 1 reappointment and 1 new position.
yeah, there's 2 positions open. 1 person is reapplying and 2 new applicants.
I don't know about that reapply person. Lack of experience. Wow. We're lucky to have her. Oh, yeah.
I'd say Kara and Kira. Are my 2.
Anybody else?
Kara and Kira would be my 2 as well.
I'm okay to go with the group. I like them both.
So Joe, do you have anything to add?
I'm still trying to figure out, we have 3 people, and can we use all 3? So we only have 2 people. So the last one is, to me, is an absolute no-brainer. She's already serving and she's amazing, has an amazing resume. The other 2, I'm not really stuck on either one of them. I really like, I like them both. I like Joshua because he's a different perspective, and I think he can add to that committee, add some diversity to that committee, as opposed to, you know, all doing the same or liking the same thing. I think he would add to that. So my preference would be Joshua.
So it looks like it's Kira and Tara.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie.
Do we have just a moment I could go take a quick?
Yes. We're re-queuing for the next one. So if we want to take 5.
Sorry, I muted you.
No.
You did.
We're taking 5. Okay, we are back from a brief break. The next group is Budget Committee, and it's Neil over here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Neil Wilbringer, Budget Procurement Manager in our Finance Department. Nice to be here tonight. We have Budget Committee interviews. We're interviewing for members to represent wards 1, 2, and 5, and then also Ward 4. So we have Steve Schmuck, who was appointed to the Planning Commission and has represented Ward 4 on the Budget Committee. And so the council may choose to leave Steve in that role on the Budget Committee for another year, or ask another member to take that place and ask Steve to step down, so that the council have that discretion.
Actually, I don't, Mary Bridget, you may have to help us with this Budget Committee, Planning Commission thing. Can we appoint a planning commissioner to the Budget Committee?
The rules say that you, says that you should try and avoid it, so it's not an outright prohibition. And there's a specific statute about Budget Committee and planning commissioners that, see if I have this right, Budget Committee officers should not be like officers of the agency, and there's some question about what planning commissioners do, that they're technically considered officers, the type of recommendations they make. So it's not recommended to have a planning commissioner also be on your Budget Committee. But I think since you were down so many, you had so many vacancies, you had 1 year left, I think it was like see the interviews and see what you have, and
Okay.
you might be able to make a decision then.
Thank you for that. And so the applicants that we have tonight are from wards 2, 5, and 6. So there's some overlap with the wards that we're recruiting for. And so with that in mind, it's important to note that the charge for the Budget Committee indicates that or that the council will appoint by ward, but Budget Committee or budget law does not require appointment by ward. So the council does have discretion, in my understanding, to appoint members as they see fit, regardless of ward affiliation. So I hope that that's sufficient context. We have the 4 members here ready to interview. Janice Rout actually withdrew her application. So we no longer have Janice in the mix tonight.
Okay, very good. I think we were ready for the first one.
Is there any overlap between people interviewing for the budget and interviewing for planning? I'm just curious.
That's a good question. So it does look like, so Jason Miller interviewed for the SPAC, and then Alan Stout is also interviewing for Planning Commission.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I think we're ready for the first person.
And the first person actually is Devin, and she's remote.
Oh, okay, very good then.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So Ruth, I thought Ruth Munoz was applying for budget, or she interviewed with us last and we recommended that she come back for this one. Is that right?
It's not planning. It's on the interview.
Okay. I knew there was one of the two, something like that.
That's right, kind of what I was asking.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're still getting a little organized, Devin. All right. Hi, Devin.
Hi, everybody.
So the plan for the evening is we're going to do a round of introductions. Then I will ask a set of questions. Since we've got so many this evening, I'm just going to ask the whole set for everybody, and then we'll discuss at the end when we're done with the interviews.
Okay, I've been on the online Zoom meeting the whole time, so if you don't want to do the interviews again, or introductions again, you don't have to.
Thank you for that.
Please no more.
That's usually the part where Councilor Rodley makes a little bit of fun for me, of me for not paying attention. All right. So why are you interested in serving on the Budget Committee?
So I'm interested in serving on the Budget Committee because I would like to become involved in the decisions that are going to affect the community that I live in currently and plan to live in for the foreseeable future. I'm looking to serve really in whichever capacity that I can have the most positive impact, given my background. I had originally applied to be on the planning committee, but given my experience, I was asked to interview for this budget committee position.
While all of the Springfield services seem to have strong support from different areas of the community, it is often necessary to prioritize services for budgetary reasons. How would you go about the task of establishing priorities among services?
In order to establish priority among services given our budgets, I think the first thing we need to do is understand the needs of our communities. By living and working in Springfield, I would like to think that I have a solid understanding of what our needs are. After understanding what our community's needs are, the prioritization becomes easier in the way of understanding what is most time sensitive, and then vote to budget for those needs that are not only important for the community, but also time sensitive.
If you were on the budget committee and we're looking at one of the city's services to decide how much should be funded through general taxes and how much should be funded through specific fees on customers, what questions would you want to have answered in order to make your decision?
Well, a lot of questions. I'd be looking to understand who the services are intended to help. We would need an estimation of how much is required in order to fund those services, any past performances of those services, why we think the services would be beneficial going forward, if the services are intended to be ongoing or just budgeted for on a one-time basis. I'd be curious who would be managing or providing the services and what their past performances are in those types of roles, as well as any other pertinent information the proposer is willing to share with us.
And how do you think the work of the budget committee will improve our community?
Well, in order to improve our community, we have to spend money. I believe the work of the budget committee serves a vital role in making sure that the resources we have to improve our community are used in a very specific, measurable, and relevant way.
Right. Thank you so much. We will go through the rest of the interviews and somebody will be in touch.
Thank you.
Quick question for you. So since we have 2 people applying for Ward 5, you said that we could actually appoint them because we don't have anybody applying for Ward 1. Is that correct?
Correct. That's my understanding about, in terms of how we've managed this similar type of situation in the past and the discretion that we have.
Is that similarly what you all have done?
Yeah, so
Okay.
Historically, when we, if we've had people with awards, we sort of preferentially put them in that spot. And sometimes, and then it's, at some point where we just place them.
Okay. Thank you.
So if the council is ready, I'll go get Jason Miller.
Very good. Thank you. Come on, Jason.
Oh, sit down. We meet again.
So,
And so, missed you guys.
almost an hour.
too.
All right, so why are you interested in serving on the budget committee?
Yeah, so I've been a part of Eugene Springfield leadership and learning all about the different facets of our community. Got to hear our great mayor speak of that, and so our city manager, and just really got interested in how things work in our cities and our counties and whatnot, and just wanted to be a part of that. And so looking for places where I could serve, and the budget committee is interesting to me. I haven't really had a lot of deep, intricate knowledge in budgets, but the times that I have, I think what I could bring to this committee is someone that fairly smart, can read budgets, and then come from an outsider perspective. When I had an internship with a value engineering firm, didn't really know much about value engineering, but I sat on a committee where they were trying to figure out a street project. And I just said, well, there's a $25,000 line speaking digitally between this light and the next light. Why is that? Just asking. And they're like, well, we want to time the lights. And I said, well, what's the rule on how far apart those need to be for traffic not to be have an impediment? And they're like, oh, I can't even remember how many feet it was, but it was obviously that this was like quarter mile or something. So it was beyond that. And I said, well, we don't need it. Can we save $25,000 there? So willing to speak up, to a room full of engineers and just ask those questions, and we save some money there. And then again, when I was in the HOA, our board has the budget's reviewed by a third party every so many years, and they took a look at that. And suddenly there was this huge fence project that was suddenly added to it. So I was able to look and see, why is this fence suddenly here in our budget? And then do the calculations and see, oh, look, this is actually leading to a per household increase. And, I'm just willing to ask those questions, see that and read it in the budget. Try not to flatter out.
While all of the Springfield services seem to have strong support from different areas, it is often necessary to prioritize services for budgetary reasons. How would you go about the task of establishing priorities among services?
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? That's where all the fun begins. I think, to me, I think public safety is huge. I think education is huge. You really have to find places in the budget where maybe something doesn't have to be done right away, and it won't deteriorate it too long by pushing it down the road a few years. One thing I do understand working at a utility, I worked at EPUD for a while, is that you have to raise budgets to keep the same level of services for the community because of inflation and whatnot. So, but that's kind of where I come from. Education's huge for the city, and safety, but also public housing, I think is huge. Big problem in our community right now.
If you were on the budget committee and we're looking at one of the city's services to decide how much should be funded through general taxes and how much should be funded through specific fees on customers, what questions would you want to have answered in order to make that decision?
We'd want to know in the budget how much that specific item really touches everybody, or maybe someone at whole community isn't involved in this, but it really does trickle down, like education. In our schools, not everyone has a child that goes to a school, but everyone in the community is affected by quality education in our community. So that maybe not be in the general budget, but just talking about examples, that's what I want to ask is, as far as general budget goes, that everyone is affected by those things, or maybe it's a very specific set of people that are affected by a specific line item. Perhaps that should go to increased fees.
How do you think the work of the budget committee will improve our community?
Because the services that the city provides really do affect everybody and make our community a place that we want to live in. So we want to make sure that we have a sustainable model that we can continue these services without overtaxing or overfeeing everybody. So it's always that huge balance of providing things that we all love to enjoy versus taking money from people. I think the budget committee's job is to find where that balance is.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
You're coming back for planning too?
No. I'll try to find another committee so we can see each other again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring in Arthur next.
Perfect, thank you.
Keep us awake.
Good evening, everyone.
So we're gonna go around, do a quick round of introductions, and then I will get into the questions. I'm gonna ask all the questions tonight since we've got quite a few interviews and that helps speed things along. Sure. Victoria?
I'm Victoria. I'm represent Ward 5, which is like mid Thurston area.
Michelle Weber, Ward 1, Hayden Bridge Gateway area.
Steamboat, West.
I'm Corey Rodley and my pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I represent Ward 3, which goes right up the middle.
Sean Van Gordon, Mayor.
Joe Pishneri, Ward 6 out of Thurston.
So why are you interested in serving on the budget committee?
Well, there are really two main reasons. One is I want to get the feeling of giving back to the community. That's always been a value of mine. And in the process of doing that, use some of my experience and the skills that I gained over my career. And then the second thing is to keep my mind active and tackle something that seems like a challenge, and a budget is definitely a challenge. It's a puzzle. I enjoy puzzles.
Well, all of Springfield services seem to have strong support from different areas of the public. It is often necessary to prioritize services for budgetary reasons. How would you go about the task of establishing priorities among services?
I want to look at what the history was for a particular service compared to other services and also compared to other cities. So for example, if a particular service is using 1.5% of the budget in this city, is that fairly normal for cities of this size? And also over time, is that something that has grown or declined over time? Any evidence of need? Is there garbage in the streets? Are there potholes, et cetera? You know, something that is obvious, or individuals coming forward, citizens coming forward and saying this, you know, this is a need. So all of those factors, looking at current service levels, you know, what has been the current service level in the past, and taking into account inflation and such, what would be the current service level now? So weighing all of those and trying to figure out, are there areas where we have been underinvesting? And are there areas where maybe we can pull back a little bit and shift toward those underinvestments?
If you were on the budget committee and we're looking at one of the city services to decide how much should be funded through general taxes, and how much should be funded through specific fees, what are some examples of questions that you would want answered?
Well, one thing I'd want to know is, can it be done, can a fee be administered cost effectively? Because obviously there's a mechanism for administering the fee, and that takes some funds and some personnel. What is the general fund fee split in other cities for that service? Are we doing something abnormal? What has it been in the past? And if you shift toward a fee, how is that going to affect people who are going to have difficulty affording that fee? So, and then the other aspect of it is, are you going to be driving with that fee activities that may actually create a cost elsewhere? Increasing your garbage fees and having people dump their garbage by the side of the road.
And how do you think the work of the budget committee will improve our community?
Well, I see the budget as an essential link between the citizens' desires. Of course, obviously, they express those desires through electing representatives, but it also, the budget is a key part of implementing those citizens' desires. So they elect their representatives, the representatives come up with a proposed budget. The budget committee is that second set of eyes by citizens as well as council to make sure that it looks reasonable and to provide recommendations for changes if necessary, probably not major changes, but second set of eyes and giving it some imprimatur of reasonableness by the citizenry.
All right, great. That's all the questions I had. So we will be in touch. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring Alan's doubt in now. Yes, please, thank you. Right, that's what it is. Seriously. You know everybody here, Alan?
I believe, I don't know this counselor, Michelle Weber.
Michelle Weber.
What a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. I do know everybody. I don't think we've been acquainted either, Ms. Robert.
Well, then I'm gonna start with the questions. Why are you interested in serving on the budget committee?
I believe in financial transparency, and I want to contribute in the small way that I can to increase financial transparency within the city's budget. It's a huge budget. There's a lot of questions to be asked, and I think one of the crucial areas that all citizens can be involved with is asking questions of the processes of the city so that there's greater ownership from the citizens in the machinery of local government.
And while all Springfield services seem to have strong support from different areas of the community, it is often necessary to prioritize services for budgetary reasons. How would you go about the task of establishing priority services?
Right, so I always take a fix it first approach to all the different things that are happening. That said, I look at where the areas of the greatest need, and it really depends. In a lot of ways, I can't. I see the budget committee not as much a policy-making position as much as asking the questions on behalf of the city council and on behalf of the citizens. So it's hard for me to say where I would prioritize on a policy point of view. That said, I think the simplest and the lowest hanging fruit where you can make the greatest difference with the least amount of budget increase would be where I would probably focus my efforts.
If you were on the budget committee and we're looking at one of the city services to decide how much should be funded through general taxes and how much should be funded through specific fees on customers, what correct questions would you want answered in order to make that decision?
I would want to look at what's the overall capital investment for the project, what are the ultimate liabilities? How much of those liabilities are, or how much the users are having to contribute versus the overall needs of the city. For example, if we have a high-end development, I would want to look at just how important is it for the city to be subsidizing some of the high-end developments versus for example, putting those resources towards a area of town that was 70 or more years old that actually required some renovation in order to be sustainable for another 70 years.
And how do you think the work of the budget committee improves our community?
Again, it increases transparency. It creates greater buy-in for the citizens. And I think it promotes greater information sharing so that the citizens within Springfield can see and business people can see that their funds are being spent well.
Okay. Thank you so much. We'll see you back in a couple of minutes.
Sounds good.
Down right here, or wherever you're more comfortable.
Okay, so we have 3 open spots for, we can fill up to 4 because Steve is left for the planning commission. I want to make sure everybody knows that is an option. Or we can wait and do planning commission interviews and then sort the whole thing out from there.
That's what I would rather do, especially when we have people overlapping with planning commission. Is that okay with everybody else?
Seeing some head nods and thumbs up. Sandy?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have 4 applicants. 3 of them are here in person, and I'm assuming one's online as planned. And we have 2 positions that you are filling with those vacancies.
Very good. I think we are ready for Ruth. Hello. I think you know everybody.
I'm not sure. I don't believe I've met Steve and Michelle. I think I've seen
We
you
run
at
across each other, but I
other.
don't know the formally introduction.
Yes, yes, I know. So, and Corey, I think I've seen you, but not actually. Yeah.
We're on our 20th interview. If I try to give introductions, everybody's like, we know everybody. If I'm like, oh, we met.
We don't even know who we are anymore.
Right. City Council, 2023. All right. Why did you apply for the planning commission?
I basically enjoy committee work that develops any community resource that's really going to benefit the population as well as improve economic development. I've been attracted to those type of opportunities, mainly where I work in Cottage Grove. I've been highly involved there. I also like how the commissioner's responsibility and role aligns with not only making decisions, but you also get to be an advisor to the city council related to codes and plans. I also like that this role allows me to do what I feel I do best, which is to be an advocate and a liaison with the community.
Economic development and infrastructure are two of the council's major goals. If you think about how development happens, do you have opinions on how costs should be shared between developers and the public?
I do, because I think infrastructure, it's important to have uniformity and that there's consistency within what the public uses. And those codes need to be available not only within the development, but also out in the street. So there can be public use available where the development has built, but also the city has some investment in that property. I've seen in a lot of ways that if the city takes care of what gets to the property line and there's no infrastructure of streets within that property, then it's on the developer what he develops according to code on that land. But if there's a street system or there's pedestrian paths or anything in that development, I believe the best way for the city and the developer to have a shared investment in making sure it is maintained and is operable, that there needs to be a shared component once that system is within their land. Otherwise, it's on the developer and what they do.
If you had a magic wand and you had the ability to change anything for the Springfield Development Code, do you have something you would change?
You betcha. I think it would be wise to have larger cul-de-sacs. What I mainly for ease of access for those who are coming to a location within that neighborhood or development, and also for those who are transit dependent, it's really hard to get in, to navigate in and out of the site if there's a lack of turnaround space or a place for folks to park. And my reasoning for that is I think you might go there as a innocent party who doesn't know what that site is like. But when you can't find a place to park and you can't even get close to who you're trying to intersect with, you're not going to go back. And so I see it as a negative economic and quality of life issue that I would love to see changed.
How would you like to see the city change in the next 10 years? And how do you see the planning commission helping accomplish that?
I love how the Springfield is a business-friendly community, and also that you're wanting to support what will be valued for our citizens. So when I look at a 10-year plan, I'm saying that the planning commission, in order to know what that plan should accomplish, is to first find out from the public what they feel they need. And when they go out to the public and gain information, then it's the role, in my opinion, of the planning commission to come up with the city staff's help to find reports, to do research, to come up with how can we make that happen. within other contexts of code and requirements and the different plans. The reason I go from that approach is there's too much turnover within leadership and within even government positions that it's hard to have consistency through 10 years. But if the public knows what the goal is and they're brought along with the process, I believe you'll have more of a buy-in and success in getting through a 10-year plan.
Describe the relationship between the planning commission to the city council and the city staff to the planning commission.
That's a good one. The planning commission serves as an advisory body and mainly within the legislative aspects of changes to master plans and as well as serves as write this down, Committee for Citizen Involvement. And that's in order to do that public engagement. And so I believe that's that relationship between the planning commission and the city council.
Right.
And with the staff helps us to develop the reports and analysis.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
So Mayor, Sandy stepped out of the room to try to get the next applicant on the phone because Isaac is not on our virtual.
I believe he's traveling internationally or something at the moment. So
Could be. So if you would like,
I think we could have Alan back up and keep going,
Alan would.
keep going, and we'll come back to Isaac if he shows. Hello again.
Hi.
Why did you apply for the planning commission?
After living abroad for a couple of years, I found that there was a lot of things that I would love to see incrementally change within Springfield that I would think would make a greater, more family-friendly, business-friendly place for generations of Springfielders to be.
Economic development and infrastructure are two major council goals. If you think about how the development happens, do you have any opinions on how costs should be shared between developers and the public?
Primarily, we have to be very conservative. We have to be conservative as a city council and not overspend on tax benefits to developers. The city should be strong enough to support. The city should be attractive and strong enough to not have to give away millions in tax incentive financing. That said, the work of especially local developers is extremely crucial and extremely important to support. So I would also look at what is the strategic end of the city, and I would probably assess the different projects individually.
If you had a magic wand and you had the ability to change the Springfield Development Code, what would you change?
Simple. I would allow every single neighborhood by its right and every single zoning density to move to the next level of intensity. That means that a single family house can become a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, without any red tape, without any major payments of SDCs, etc.
How would you like to see the city change in the next 10 years? And how do you see the planning commission helping to do that?
I'd like to see a tremendous increase in walkability, especially in targeted neighborhoods. And I think that the planning commission can help identify what those neighborhoods are, where we want to make those key investments so that we're not spending on transit investments needlessly, but we're targeting key areas so that we're actually taking people who want to go somewhere, places they want to go.
Okay. So describe the relationship between the planning commission and the city council and city staff and planning commission.
I see the planning commission as an interpretive body, most of all. It's looking at what are the statutes and what are the ordinances within the city. Does the application for the proposed development meet those criteria? If it does, then approving it, and if not, then not approving it. And if it is approval, but with some hesitations, then raising those issues to the city council or city staff, who can then raise those with the city council.
All right. That looks like it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have Isaac?
No.
Okay, so let's just keep going and see if we could, do we have Taylor here? Yeah. Oh, there you are. Oh. Well, you may win the prize for the very last interview right here.
Did I? I think approximately elimination, I think I might be last.
I'm assuming you've heard all the introductions.
Yeah, the only person I've met is Victoria, and that was one time, and then I haven't met any of you. I would go around and address you individually, but I think we could be here forever, so.
All right, so what attracted you to applying for the planning commission?
I mean, honestly, just knowing that there was a vacancy in a spot where I could come in and fill and try to help in any way I can. Lived in Springfield my whole life. Family's been here since early 1900s, and I'm very eager to learn and help and understand what's going on. And I take a lot of pride in being involved and taking in knowledge from different spectrums. So coming in not a biased view, just an idea that's going to be progressive for everybody. So like if I had to look into the planning commission as someone that I'd want in there, I think that's the kind of people I would want. So I figure I should probably apply.
Economic development and infrastructure are two major council goals. If you think about how the development happens, do you have any opinions on how costs should be shared between developers and the public?
Yeah. To me, it kind of depends on each situation. Where the developer's coming from. One thing I think that's very important, Springfield's done a pretty good job of, from what I've seen, is keeping those developments as some of the local developers. And that's something I think that's very important when you're looking at what's going to happen over the next 10 years. So as far as that being public and everyone understanding that that's a direction that's trying to go upon, then sounds like where it could be.
If you had a magic wand and you had the ability to change the Springfield Development Code, what would you change?
I mean, I should be plain honest with that. I mean, hearing what everybody else had to say was awesome. And as far as codes I would change, I'm never someone that's going to step over my boundaries and say that I'd understand what the codes are to be changed. And that's why I'm sitting here. It's, to get into involvement of something like this, you got to start somewhere. And this is where I'd like to start. So getting into code and changes, maybe I'll have something better for you next time we talk. But right now, I'm just,
How would you like to see the city change in 10 years? And how do you see the planning commission helping change the city?
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious that Springfield's growing really fast. I mean, there's developments going up everywhere. I mean, we're building over 1,800 homes over in Marcola. And those are all great things, but understanding how is that going to affect the community and how is it these people that are living in the community, how are they going to see it from their point of view and really want to get along with that and enjoy it. So the developers are coming in, that stuff's happening. Yeah, I think that's very understandable.
Can you describe the relationship between the planning commission and the city council and the city staff and the planning commission?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that when you're in the planning commission, you're just an advisory to the council. The council's the ones making the final decisions and bringing it out to the public. And it's your job to understand all the liabilities and all the details and use the great staff that you guys appoint to come up with the best information for the council.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks, Taylor.
Okay, looks like we've got Isaac. Oh, there you are.
I'm here. Can you hear and see me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry that's been a little bit rough with this connection.
We've been running just a little bit behind, so it's no problem at all. If you're ready, I'm gonna get into the questions.
Sure.
Why? What attracted you to apply for the planning commission?
I've been looking for something to get more involved. Really love Springfield, and the planning commission is a little bit more inside of my wheelhouse as somebody who works in housing and has previously worked in construction and property management and done a little bit of development. It seemed like a better fit for me than some of the other opportunities that the city has.
Economic development and infrastructure are two major council goals. If you think about how development happens, how do you have any opinions on how costs should be shared between developers and the public?
Sure. Yeah, I think that if the city thinks about what its development goals are and figures out, what kind of development it wants to have happen, it just needs to make sure that those things are financially incentivized in a way that makes them happen, makes them pencil out for developers without over incentivizing, creating costs for the city that are not necessary for the city to bear.
If you had a magic wand and you could change anything about the Springfield Development Code, what would you change?
So I don't know if it's actually the development code. If I could change anything, it would be the UGB. But if I had to pick something from the development code, I think I would stick with streamlining and simplifying some of the application and like the application processes for new projects.
How would you like to see the city change in 10 years? And how do you think the planning commission helps change the city?
I think that the city is doing a lot of great things already. I think that they, if they could succeed at some of the projects that they're working on in Glenwood and to find a way to do the Main Street redevelopment that works for everybody. I think that the city's headed in a pretty great direction. And I think that the planning commission has its piece in those things. And I think that they just need to do their piece and stay the course in some ways.
Describe the relationship between the planning commission and the city council and the planning commission and the staff.
So the relationship between the planning commission and council is that the planning commission is tasked with making recommendations for council. There's a lot of granular detail. There's a lot of getting out into the weeds that the planning commission does to bring recommendations to council so that the council can make decisions as the actual elected officials of the city. The relationship with staff, I imagine, is pretty similar to the relationship between the volunteers and the staff at some of the nonprofits that I've worked with. It's a collaborative relationship where they work together in their prescribed roles to make those recommendations for council.
All right, that was the last question. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so we're planning commit. I think the best way to do this is probably planning commission first, and then we'll swing back to budget committee and sort that out.
So quick question for you, if somebody, because we have more planning commission people than we have positions, but we have kind of less people for budget than is there any crossover? If they apply for planning, then they can't be considered for budget? I guess that's what I'm trying to ask,
So honestly, we don't know. Because when we tried to do that in the past, people just don't have interest in different committees, right? The schedule may not work out, right? So what I would say is, consider if people apply for both, we can consider them for both. If for some reason they drop out of one and we still have spots, then maybe we can divide it up between, the right council on call and encourage them to reapply for the other. But we shouldn't try to place them in the they didn't apply.
and I won't complicate things. Sorry.
No, like, trust me, we've been through that one before and it's.
We just had someone who interviewed for planning that I think would be great on budget. It's like,
So Joe,
Thank you. I was just getting ready to just jump in on there with my recommendations, but if you're ready for that, or otherwise I can wait.
well, I'm ready for it. Hop in.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the planning commission. And I really like Alan Stout. I think he would be my number one choice. I think that my other, I gotta tell you, with I would be happy with either Isaac or Taylor. They both really had some great answers. I think they would, they both have got some expertise that would be helpful as well. So I would support anybody's else with Isaac or Taylor, but my number one choice would be Alan Stout. I think too, going back to the budget, Victoria brought up a good scenario. Well, maybe not so good. I personally would see if we could reach out to Ruth and see if she would entertain being on the budget committee. I think she would be great. I think she just, I think she underestimates her ability to be on a budget committee from her past work experience. And then, and if we want to go ahead and finish, or do you want to finish the planning, then we can go to the budget, right?
First, and then we can dive into budget.
Okay, sounds good. So that's my 2 cents on planning.
My two are Ruth and Isaac. For the planning.
I think Isaac is a great choice, and he would be our second person that's involved in real estate by the rules that we're showing there. Alan or Ruth would be fine with me on the second one.
Okay, Steve or Michelle?
I would say Isaac and Ruth because she applied for the planning commission. So I think we need to respect that. That's where she put her name.
Okay.
Somebody, you say first names and you say last names. Alan Stout won selections. And name mix up. I'm not sure on the second one, to tell you the truth. Oh, I know, I'm looking at him here. So, not her.
It was Alan, and then Taylor was in the suit, and then Isaac.
Move back here.
And Ruth.
We're getting
Isaac and Stout.
Okay, so I have, I'm counting, I have Isaac is in, I have, and then, so my preference was Alan and Isaac. And if, but Victoria, you do have, you did give us both, so.
No, Alan is fine.
Okay.
I'm saying, yeah, Isaac for sure, but Alan.
So I'm hearing Isaac and Alan are being appointed to the planning commission.
Correct.
Perfect.
Okay. You could get your Wayback Machine and go budget committee. So this is where it's going to get a little bit complicated. So Neil, do we have seat of budget appointments in here at all?
Not tonight. We've received one application for one open position.
Okay,
That'll be considered separately.
okay, so we have 3 spots, and this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky because but you can use the 4th spot if you would like, right? Because we had left Steve in that spot to sort of for this discussion, if you will. Go ahead, Corey.
Well, I have a couple things to say. One, and I was thinking about this coming here today, that I'm somewhat disappointed that we have not completed the process of figuring out how to do committees and commissions after all of the work that Councilor Pitts and Counselor Steer and I did, wondering if it's gonna actually happen or not now. And I remember very clearly that when we did this before, there was a lot of hullabaloo about making sure that someone is not serving on both the budget and the planning commission. So everyone was like, we want to appoint Steve Schmunk to the planning commission, but he's gonna have to vacate his position on the budget committee. And so now it's like, we're like, well, how do we have a person be in both places? So I just want to call out that we need to get really clear about what we're doing, because when we're continuously leaning towards putting as many conservative people in as many places as we can, it doesn't look that great. So I would say that we would appoint the three people who are on here, Devin and Jason and Arthur. And since Alan is who is being chosen to put on the planning commission, and that Steve Schmunk would need to choose one or the other. That's my opinion about it. What was the last part?
I'm sorry, you had Devin,
Devin, Jason, and Arthur, the three who are not.
Yeah, that's one.
I agree with Corey on the dilemma on selection, but it's hard to get people to volunteer for these sometimes. I've actually had somebody come out in the hallway and pull me in and tell me I'm volunteering for a committee before, because they couldn't find anybody. We regretted that.
Okay, so do you have a choice for folks, the three? Okay, got it. Joe?
Yes, I'm okay. Well, I'm a little confused because I haven't heard of anybody talking or putting their political stance as conservative. I'm not sure where that came from. But this is a bipartisan selection and there's no political affiliation I'm aware of. So that being said, I like Devin. I think she would do fine. I do like Jason. And what was that other one that Steve, what was your other one?
Arthur.
And Arthur. Yeah, he's got the background, crazy, amazing background. The one that came in, it was a previous state employee. That was Arthur. Yeah. So those are the three that I would select. And obviously Steve should be removed because he's on a planning commission. We got enough applicants to fill the budget positions, which is the intent in the first place. So we have enough people, we can fill them, and Steve can stay on the planning commission.
We don't though. Well,
No, we don't. Okay, so let's make life easier, right? Because this is a little bit of let's put the Steve conversation to the side for a second. Let's get through the first three people and then we'll swing by and we'll back and talk about Steve for.
Okay, well, those three are my selections, and whatever we end up with Steve on that statement, he's going to be done in a few months anyway. So whatever.
You're good. You're good, Michelle, with the three.
Yeah, I'm with those three.
Okay.
May I ask, Devin currently lives within Ward 2. Jason currently lives within Ward 5, and Arthur is within Ward 5.
Oh, yeah.
So my understanding is the open positions are Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 4, and Ward 5.
And are the terms the same length?
Yes.
Okay.
So
We need to.
Devin is Ward 2, and we have a Ward 2 position. We have a Ward 1 and a Ward 2 position open. Jason is Ward 5, and Arthur is Ward 5.
So I would say let's put Devin in 2, Jason in 5, and then Arthur back in 1. I'm looking out and saying, okay. So let's swing back to the other conversation, which is when Neil, like when you look at the time between when budget starts, which I'm not looking at a calendar here, do we have time to put the Steve Schmunk's seat back out again? Because but
I think it would be tight with council recess. I think there's probably just enough room. There may be one, I would have to look at a calendar. But I think there is probably one council session after recess prior to the council or the budget committee starting on April 25th. That would provide us time for appointment, but with that.
We could push the recruitment out and you could potentially appoint on April 17th. We can borrow some time from that work session to do an interview.
Okay.
So yes, it's feasible.
So it is possible. And so Victoria,
Well, then I guess that answers my question because I think that we have someone who has applied for planning commission that we all liked for that position as well. I think Ruth did a good job with that. So I think that it's something we should consider. If we're going to put it out, then we should recommend that she at least apply for that. If we're not going to be able to potentially ask her and save all the work and hassle of going out and redoing this again and trying to squeeze it in when we have someone that very well may be interested in doing that.
okay, so I think if people are good, right? That what I'm hearing is that we're gonna ask Steve to choose, right, which is gonna go to the planning commission, and then we would put it back out, understanding that if we don't get anybody, we'll be 1% short for budget committee.
And if I may clarify, if I reach out to Ruth in the morning and she's willing to serve on the budget committee, do you want us to still go out on an extended recruitment?
I'm hearing, okay, so let's work our way through this. You want to go back out? Okay,
We don't have to.
okay,
I agree for sake of timing. I mean, if she's interested in, we have crossovers already here that we've interviewed tonight. So if she has interest in being one of those crossovers, then
okay. So,
Hear you telling me that if Ruth accepts the budget committee position, I am not extending the recruitment. Otherwise, I will extend the recruitment with potential interview and appointment on April 17th.
perfect.
Got it.
Okay, last question before we wave our magic hands and get to the regular session. And I don't know, somebody's gonna may have to remind, when's the committee stuff coming back?
Or a regular appointment?
No, for the day, the subcommittee that we had in the fall, were you bringing it back to the retreat?
Yeah, it's gonna go to the retreat, and then after that would be if you wanted to change your rules after that.
So if you have more questions,
I don't have any more questions.
we didn't forget. All right, Joe, is your hand left?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I missed that whole, or out of the loop on that conversation about checking to see if Ms. Linez would be interested, and I would concur with that. I don't see any reason to spend more staff time or council time on if she wants that. She's, to me, is perfectly qualified.
Perfect. Do you have any questions before we switch committees? Before we switch meetings, because we got a special meeting.
I do not have any questions. I feel that I have all the information. Thanks.
5 minutes. We're almost there, guys. I know we're getting to the end. Okay, I'm gonna do the work session. The staff is actually leaving. We've kept them here so long.
stand up.
I know. And I'm sorry, as a point, can we please do roll calls if we have an additional?
Yes.
Thank you.
These chairs. We need to move to the other room, right?
No, we're gonna stay here.
They sell those.
See here.
Do you want to take it from the other room?
Steps. What I'm doing. Last meeting before we go on break.
Yes.
Yes.
Doesn't it feel like it? Feels like it should be.
You want to add another item at the last minute? All right, I'm gonna call the regular session, the special regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here,
Councilor Weber,
Here.
Councilor Mo,
here.
Councilor Rodley,
Here.
Councilor Doyle,
Barely, but yes.
and Councilor Missionary.
Yes, still here. Thanks.
All right. As we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask the members of the audience who are joining us by phone, online, or online to please keep yourself on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. There is one time designated for public testimony this evening under public hearings. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the entrance of the meeting and give it to the city recorder. If you are joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak, please raise your hand in Zoom. The order of the public testimony is as follows. Anyone person in the city council chambers or the Jesse main room. Or anyone who's raised their virtual hand. First item, please.
First item is under public hearing is item number 1, fiscal year 23 supplemental budget 3. This is resolution number 1. Resolution adjusting resources and requirements in the insurance fund, and Nathan Bell is here for the staff report.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to apologize for sneaking this on at the last minute. This should be fast. The item in front of you this evening is a request to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution adjusting resources and requirements in the insurance fund. So this is an off-cycle supplemental budget. We did not plan or anticipate this earlier in the year. Just to give you a little history on why this is coming in front of you now. We go back a few years, there was a lot of interest for the state to address the unfunded PERS liability that government at all levels were struggling with across the state. The legislature identified some funds and wanted to incentivize agencies creating side accounts, and we're offering up a 25% match. So at that time, we had started to set some funds aside. We're calling them our PERS rainy day fund. It was a result of benefit holidays from our excellent experience with our health plan. We identified, what we thought is we could potentially, if you had chosen to set aside $2 million into a side account, knowing that if we got selected, we could come back later with that decision. The state, I don't think anticipated how popular the program would be when the application window opened. All the funds were allocated within the first hour, and a number of agencies ended up on a wait list, including ourselves. So that answered the question for us. Fast forward to about a year ago, the state identified some more funds with the goal of funding all of the applications and agencies that ended up on the wait list and no more. Part of that funding is from sports betting, just for your interest. So at that time, we, talking with the council leadership and management, and kind of considering the sort of uncertainty around the economy at that time, when you send these funds over to the state, you essentially give up control of those funds. With this program, if you had a contribution of 10 million or more, you could choose your amortization period. But for anything under 10 million, you didn't get to choose, and it's a 20-year amortization. So what that essentially does is just spreads out the benefit thinly over a longer period of time. Given the uncertainty in the economy, to give up that control, we felt that it was better for us to hold on to those funds where we could use them over a shorter time frame, for instance, if there was a recession. So at that time, we weren't interested. And then fast forward to this month. I got an email that said, hey, we're down to the last month. If funds are deposited by March 31st, you can still take advantage of that match. I revisited our balance in our PERS rainy day, and we had another benefit holiday with another one anticipated in fiscal year 23, putting our projected rainy day reserve balance at 5 million at the end of fiscal year 23. Recognizing now that we could participate in this program and still retain a sizable balance if we needed to use it in the shorter term. The benefit of this program is that we'll get a 25% match. So we contribute 2 million. They match it with 500,000. And then the state has a much more aggressive investment policy. They're over a longer time period. They've historical average return for them has been around 7%. If we were to look at our historical earnings on our investments, it's probably down in the 2 to 3%. So we're also going to see better returns on those dollars. They've got a tool that you can put in the side account, and it'll give you an idea of the impact that it's going to have for your organization. that 2.5 million will save us roughly 4.1 million in future PERS costs. So it's a great program. I definitely believe in it. And knowing now that we can do this and still retain a sizable reserve balance, I feel it makes a lot of sense. And so we reconsidered, and that's why we're coming to you in such short notice with the supplemental budget. So with that, any questions?
Any questions? Joe?
Thank you. And all I want to do is thank you, Nate. I think this is a great opportunity for the city. I mean, seemed great to be able to pay something, but it's still great to get this type of discount and this jumping on this program. So I wanted to compliment you on your good work.
Right.
I support it.
I'm going to open the public hearing. There are no cards in the room. If somebody online is interested in following the testifying to this, please raise your hand. I'm going to close the public hearing and I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to, darn it, hang on a second. Adopted resolution number 1.
Second.
Neil, can you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo.
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 5 yeses, 0 nos, and that is the only item. So we are going to call it a wrap. Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thanks, you all.
Thanks, Sean.